So we're talking about the signs of the times. We're talking about, revealing Revelation, but also end-time prophecy. Some is in the book of Revelation, some is not. Obviously, Revelation is something that is spread throughout the Bible. And so we've been dealing with the subject of the rapture. The rapture is a very important issue in the Bible. And the one thing that we've established is the Bible talks about the rapture, the catching away. It doesn't use the word rapture. It talks about the catching away of the saints. It talks about those kinds of things in multiple locations in the Bible. One thing we know for a fact is that there will be a catching away of the saints. The Bible is very clear about that. Now, we may argue about whether it's pre-trib, mid-trib, post-trib, premillennial, pre-wrath. I mean, all kinds of different concepts out there as far as when it's going to happen. But that's because God had made that very Christ made that very clear too, that we don't know the day or the hour. We're only going to be able to see the signs. And he did declare that there were signs. In reality, he's like, it's kind of one of the funny, because one of the descriptions he gave, and we'll talk about that maybe a little bit today, but one of the descriptions he gave was that he was talking to those that did not believe he was the Messiah in the first coming of Christ. And he's like, we all know the signs. If you see a bunch of buzzards around, you know there's a dead carcass there. The sign that the birds are flying around, that they're flying around, it means that there's a dead carcass there. And, that's obvious to you, but you can't even see the sign that the first coming is here. I am here, the Messiah. He was trying to say that. And it makes sense. There's lots of signs that we see about things, right? Signs about this and signs about that. And we can read the signs. And I think, so what we're doing is we're dealing with the 7 signs. Or not the 7 signs. We're dealing with 7 signs. These are not the only signs. There's many signs that are talked about in the Bible. And most of us here know about the famous ones. There'll be wars and rumors of wars, and there'll be famine and earthquakes, and we understand those kind of things, and that's true, and we understand the ones we talk about. So last week we dealt with 3 of them in a pretty substantial way, and but the one thing I want to make sure that we understand is that that there will be a rapture. And we need to open up our eyes, because the Bible is very clear also that we need to be watching and waiting. We need to occupy until he comes, right? And so there's really no discrepancy among Christian churches and among most churches that there will be a rapture. That's kind of understood, okay, because it's pretty plain, which we discussed last week. But we talked about how you need to be watching and be waiting in Luke chapter 12, verse 37, which is on page 2. Oh, mine doesn't have page numbers. I got one without the page numbers. Your guys have the page numbers. Okay. So I can stay up with you guys. Mine was before I had page numbers. Where's the at? Okay. Because it would be easier for me to let you guys know where I'm at. I decided to add page numbers because it was so long, but I'd already printed mine off my computer. So anyway, and so on page 2 at the top it says, after all, Jesus himself said, those who are ready and waiting when he returns will be rewarded. Who will be rewarded? Those who are ready and waiting. And not those that maybe think it might not happen. That's not what it says. Not those who are doubting Thomases. It doesn't say that. It says those, Jesus himself, and being read in your Bible, after all, Jesus himself said, those who are ready and waiting, okay? So it's important that we're ready and waiting. So sign number 1 that we talked about was Israel back in the land. And we're aware of the fact that what happened there, and you're welcome to read through that if you weren't here last week. And there's a lot there for you, but obviously, there you go. Sign number 2 is the Jews back in Jerusalem. That just because the Jews were back in the Promised Land, they weren't back in Jerusalem, really. And now they're back in Jerusalem as well. And there's still a lot of conflict there. They still don't, there's still an Islamic temple on the Temple Mount So there's a lot of things that aren't understood, but anyway, so the Jews back in Jerusalem, we discussed that last week. Sign number 3, an increase in travel and knowledge. Now, that one's pretty obvious. I talked about how that over 1900 years before, we still were pretty much traveling the same way that Jesus traveled, on camels and animals and stuff like that, right? And then all of a sudden, beginning of the 19th century, things began to change, right? And transportation then just exploded over 120 years. I mean, it is amazing when you think about the fact. See, sometimes we think 120 years is a long time. 120 years ain't very long, really, compared to history, right? We in this room believe the earth is almost right at 7,000 years old. So, I mean, really, if you think about it, that we don't believe it's quite there, but you understand what I'm saying. The point I'm trying to make is that over the last 2,000 years, not much, 120 years, we went from going 20 miles an hour on a camel or 30 miles an hour on a camel, whatever they do, to, faster than the speed of light. Sound, than sound, faster than the speed of sound, and be able to break the sound barrier. I mean, that's pretty crazy if you think about it. So, and then it's available to everybody and all the time, and I mean, I can do a good 100 in my car, no problem, and and they ride so nice at 100 nowadays, but, but I'm teasing. Anyway, but when I get my Tesla at 100, no problem, but anyway, it'll drive for me. Anyway. But an increase in travel and knowledge. I mean, the knowledge alone is crazy, right? I mean, at your fingertips. I mean, a lot of what I researched, got together, things I put together here. I don't think anybody here thinks I know all this stuff. Obviously, the research you can do nowadays in just a moment is really amazing. It really is. For instance, one of the things I asked, I wanted to know what the difference was, which I put that in here. I wanted to know what the difference was between the EU, the European Union, and NATO. And so it's like in a matter of seconds, explain the difference to me. Now, you might have known the difference, but it explained the difference to me in a matter of moments. So the knowledge is right at our fingertips, and it's flat out amazing. And so today we're going to start with sign number 4, Israel with an exceeding great army. Okay, I flew over it last week a little bit, but we didn't get into it. We were in a hurry, right? Am I correct? Yeah. Okay. So we want to make sure the notes are right here, guys, over here, the additional ones. So you guys need those. Good to have you guys. So we're going to start at sign number 4, and Israel with an exceeding great army. In a heavenly vision, of course. Hi, baby. How are you? It's my wife just came in. Of course, they're watching the recording, and I'm calling someone baby. I want to know who it is.
She'll say too much of who is baby.
Who is baby? She'll be like, "Who'd you call baby?" Oh, I say that was you. You came in late from school. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Anyway, no, you're right, Pastor Donnie. But in a heavenly vision, the prophet Ezekiel saw the Jewish people come to life and stand up as an exceedingly great army in Ezekiel chapter 37, verse 10. And the prophet Zechariah repeated this promise, speaking of a day when Israel would be like a fire among sheaves of grain, burning up the neighboring nations. In fact, he claimed even the weakest Israeli soldier would be like David. Now that's pretty powerful if you think about it. David was obviously the young king of David and Goliath, the great warrior in the Bible. And they're saying that, the claim was that the weakest Israeli soldier would be like that. Now, that would be a pretty amazing, powerful army, and really kind of unbelievable, to be honest with you. How we're hearing that the Ukrainians are doing right now against the Russians, we obviously sense that there's maybe some of that supernatural stuff going on there. I heard today that Russia, they're not claiming this, but our estimates from America and our, whatever people on the ground, our estimates are that they've, I think, lost almost 5,000 soldiers or something like that. I mean, that's crazy. We lost 300 in the Iraq War, which was horrible for us to lose that kind of. They've already lost double that. Ukraine hasn't lost anywhere near that. Obviously, they couldn't afford to lose that many. So I don't know. It's pretty crazy. Everybody did not think that's the way it would go. And the same thing was with Israel. And I'm not equating Ukraine to Israel, obviously. I'm just using it as an analogy. But so when will all this happen? When does the Bible say Israel will emerge as a world military power with an exceeding great army? When does it say that will happen? If you guessed in the last days, you would be correct. The Bible says it will happen in the last days, that's when it will take place. It says in Ezekiel 12 and 36-37, when God's people are regathered in the land just before the Messiah returns. Now I know that we understand they gathered, we figured it out last week, like 80 years ago, right? whatever it is, 70s, huh?
74.
74, thank you for remembering, appreciate it, 74 years ago. And we understand, but 74 years is not that much time, remember, in the idea of time. And so it's important to remember that. But it also said in Ezekiel 11:17, when the Jewish people have been brought back from the nations where they were scattered and given the land of Israel by God himself. And we understand that these things will happen in the last days. And today we already see this. And we see that there's an exceeding great army that has been raised up in Israel. I've been to Israel. I've met military leaders. In actuality, one of their generals actually got on the bus with us, and we went out to the edge of Israel, and we actually stood up on the side of the hill, and he explained to us that the UN was over there, and he explained the other countries were over there, and in actuality there was fighting actually happening. I'm like, we're a little close, aren't we? I was like, that's kind of interesting, but the general had explained a lot about it, and then we actually met young soldiers, and they explained how that they all become soldiers, so they can be soldiers, for the rest of their life, and then they talked about the equipment they had and all the training. We actually went and shot their weapons. They let us go in their simulations, and we simulated their training the same way they do it with the rifles. It was kind of cool. They were like lasers guns. They used lasers on them. And some of those pastors had never, handled a gun, but I grew up in Oregon, so I have definitely handled a gun. But anyway, it was pretty wild. But the training. But think about the odds of Israel winning 4 wars in 25 years, in the last 25 years. You think about that. That's amazing when you think about it. I went, they've got the wall and all this stuff, and we actually went to another place where we stood, where that obviously they were shooting missiles over, and we went to the cities where they shoot the missiles. In their playgrounds, one of the cities we went to, and I don't remember all the names, I should have wrote them down, I know I was going to talk about this, but one of the cities I went to in Israel, they showed us the parks. We went to park, and in the parks they had they made this big caterpillar thing, but yet really it was a missile shelter. So when the alarm started going off, the kids would run into those caterpillars. Yeah, oh yeah. No, they run right. Or when you hear the missile sound, they have 45 seconds, and so they stop their cars in the middle of the road and run to shelter wherever they can. They got 45 seconds. Wow. It's crazy. And the missiles, they showed them, the missiles that had landed before. So a lot of the houses now, they build them with missile shelter, bomb shelters in them. But a lot of the houses don't have that. And we met people that had lost family members to the missile attacks. Then there was a missile attack just 3 days after we left. And they'd had one just a week before as well. And they usually come in bunches of them. you know, not just one. And so it's pretty crazy when you think about it. But yet they let people come from that country to work every day. They have a gate there, just like you do on the, you know, American and Mexico border. They would let people come from that country to go to work in Israel. And people would come and they would go back home, but yet all this fighting still going on. It's pretty amazing, really. But the whole country, if you think about this, it barely cracks the top 100 nations in terms of population, but its military consistently ranks among the most powerful in the world. The whole country is less than 13,000 square miles. 13,000 square miles. Approximately the size of New Jersey. Less than 0.1% of the landmass of the surrounding nations that wish to destroy her. Does this sound like a recipe for an exceedingly great army? No, it doesn't. I mean, it's a little country in the middle of nowhere with a whole lot of people around it that want to destroy it, right? But that's exactly what Israel Defense of the IDF is. And that's the only thing my boys wanted was two of them had asked me to buy them IDF t-shirts. They wanted to wear the t-shirts and the Israel Defense Force. And honestly, I didn't know a whole lot about the Israel Defense Force. They told me. They're like, they're the best. Now you do understand they're both in the military. One's a Marine and that one was an Army. We have 4 kids in the military. But that one that they asked for was, you know, they're in the Marines and I'm like, okay, they knew exactly what they were asking for. One of the best militaries in the world. But surrounded on all sides, a brand new nation with no formal military emerged victorious in a multi-front war in 1948 with Syria, Jordan, and Egypt. Preparing for war, the Israelis struck first in 1967. The results, they achieved overwhelming victory in just 6 days. It's called the 6-Day War. 6 days. Countries that, all of those countries, I believe every single one of those countries are bigger and have more military. Yeah. And combined, they have a whole lot more. And Syria, Jordan, and Egypt, but yet Israel was able to win in 6 days. That's unheard of. A mighty army being raised up in the middle. Caught by surprise, in 1973, her enemies almost cut Israel in half within 48 hours. But Israel quickly won back all the territory it lost, and it's seen as one of the world's greatest armies. And so, that was, of course, in 73. So if you look at them and the way that the army has been raised up, they are a feared army in the area. Now, obviously, when it comes to their equipment, yes, they have used a lot of our equipment, and we do help them, obviously. And so we give them military equipment. But they've even taken it and made it even better. For instance, the Iron Dome that they created. So, like I said, some of those missiles hit, right? So when the alarms go off, they hit, they make it through. But they told me they might shoot, 50 missiles at a time into their cities from right across the border. Literally very short amount of time. And their missile defense system normally will shoot down 90% of them. And get them out of the sky. And they have created it where now they've just shared the technology back with us on the missile defense and have made it, they've really taken it to a whole new level. They're one, I mean, if you look at it, I think this was already, oh no, it was back earlier. But Israel is blessed with some of the leading people in all areas. It's amazing, honestly, for such a small country. So the sign number 4 was, of course, that there would be an exceedingly great army raised up. And it would be an elite army. And so we see that. Has that happened? Absolutely it has. They literally say, we want them dead. We want Israel out of here. You know what I mean? Just think about it if countries are right next to us, if they were talking about, trying to destroy us all the time. Canada, Mexico, you know what I mean? I mean, I'm sure some of them don't want us to be here, but not all of them, you know what I mean? The countries themselves. Sign number 5, rise of Gog and Magog alliance. Now, this is more of an alliance, but more than 2,600 years ago, the prophet Ezekiel warned of a future time when a vast coalition of nations would attack Israel. The Bible reveals that the details of this future battle in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 38 and chapter 39. Now, I don't have time to read all of chapter 38 and 39 of Ezekiel, but I'll put it in here so you can read it, okay? And we could finish off the rest of our time. But I would like you to read Ezekiel 38, 39 later. So when does the Bible tell us the alliance will form? The Bible says this alliance will form and come against Israel in the latter days. Is that door locked? They might be in.
It's open.
Oh, they're playing in the courtyard, huh? Oh, okay. I thought maybe our group was growing. You know? Yeah. So it said this alliance will happen in the latter days. God himself confirms this when he says the invasion will occur after Israel's people have gathered from among many of the nations. So has that happened yet? Yes. They were gathered. They were scattered, and then they've been gathered back, right? And so it's important for us to understand that it would happen. It said in Ezekiel 38:8, he says, it will happen when I bring my people home from among the enemy nations. And if you read the whole thing, you'll understand. He's talking about what's going to happen, and he's saying it will happen. Okay? So now, who is this? Ezekiel identifies them, and he uses the names that were their names at the time. Okay? And so he talks about them being Magog, Raj, I can't say all of them, there you go, Tubal, Persia, Cush, Put, Gomer. Anyway, so in Ezekiel 38, 1 through 6. The current names, which are, I think, very important, but I want us to see that each one of them represent a nation existing today. In fact, long before Russia became a world power, biblical experts pointed to Rosh as the nation of Russia and Gog as its ruler. So in other words, Russia was mentioned even back when they were little nothing. When they had any power at all, had no authority at all, had no army at all. They were just like any other country over there that really meant nothing, right? And so, but Raj was Russia, and you can see here now the list I've got on page 6, that Magog was really Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan and Afghanistan, right? Anyway, so no, I mean I don't even know where some of these. I know kind of where they're at, sort of. I've looked this all on a map before, and I was being kind of funny. But you know, we recognize a few of them. Afghanistan, we know about that one. Persia is Iran. Now, and that's really important for us to understand because we hear Persia in the Bible. Persia is modern Iran. Okay, Cush is Sudan, which most of us have probably heard of Sudan. It's all these ones that've been in wars before, huh? Cush is Sudan. Libya, we all know about Libya. What is Libya, right? And then I studied these to figure these out. And then, of course, Turkey. Now, Turkey is a different one. We're going to talk about that a little bit in a few moments. But so, you know what I found interesting was up until March 21st, 1955, or 1935, the world knew the nation of Iran as Persia. So they were still called Persia up till 1935. Oh, wow. That's pretty modern. That's pretty not too long ago. They were known as Persia still. And that I found that interesting. So. So it's still the same Persia reference is in the Gog and the Magog alliance. Ezekiel prophesies over 2,600 years ago, yet in all those years, Russia and Persia have never been part of an alliance. So for 2,600 years, even though they were in existence, there was not an alliance between them. In actuality, In Russia's case, they weren't worth aligning with. They were small and insignificant until they became the USSR, you know, but they were small and insignificant. And they rose to power. And who knew that they would rise to power in the future? So when biblical scholars read about this in the early days, they looked at it and were like, okay, that country's going to do all that? Really? Now we look at it and go, well, of course, duh. You know what I mean? But you got to understand history. And so what my point is that we know things and we are responsible. We are responsible because we know more. There's more happening around us. Make sense?
Yeah.
This is whole 7 signs have been about every time. I've told you at the end of it, I said, well, obviously those things are happening. Something's different.
Yeah.
Something's happening, right? And we can see all the birds flying around the dead carcass.
Yeah.
And we're smart enough to know there's a dead carcass over there. Well, you know what? We're smart enough to know that Jesus is getting ready to come back.
Woo.
And so I thought that was interesting anyway. So there'd never been an alliance. Economic and military cooperation between Persia or Iran and Russia did not take place until 1989 in actuality. I mean, 89. Then a connection began to happen between them. But today Iran and Russia are strong allies. Russia went and helped fight with them against Syria. We understand those things happen and have been going on. They're still going on. The alliance there. I mean, Iran was about ready to crumble. They would have taken them out if Russia had not joined in and propped them up. They were going to fall apart in the last few years. They have also been helped with the atomic energy and signed agreements with Iran to finish the nuclear power plants and things like that to help them along. But today, thanks to Russia work, it once again has progress in those areas. So it had been stopped and now it's restarted. Turkey is another interesting member of the alliance. Since the rebirth of Israel, I'm at the top of page 7, second paragraph. Turkey is another interesting member of the alliance. Since the rebirth of Israel in 1948, Bible prophecy experts have struggled to figure out how Turkey fits in. Why? Because Turkey is one of the majority Muslim country, but yet it recognizes the state of Israel. So Turkey is one of those places that we are even in good relationship with. Turkey is one of those places we, it's the one, I don't know if you guys heard, remember when their president of their country had learned to fly and he flew the jets even into combat with some of the fight. This was just recently, like 10 years ago or something, maybe even less actually, but it was amazing, you know, because the young, I don't know if it was the young one coming up or the one that was actually in power, but he was a fighter pilot kind of guy because they use planes and everything like we have. And Turkey's definitely, they're modernized, but yet they're still Muslims and still, so how does Turkey going to fit in all this stuff? Turkey is also, they're a member of NATO. The purpose of NATO is to defend members of nations against Russia. That's why NATO was even created, was to be able to allow all these small countries to come together in alliance in order to defend against Russia. Well, if there's this war talk about where that, you know, they're supposed to be on Russia's side, there's something doesn't jive. So that's the thing about prophecy you guys got to understand, is that it is things that we don't understand how they all fit together. And there are things that still have to happen, or things that are going to happen. But what we've learned lately is that things can happen real fast. Is that true? I mean, Ukraine 2 months ago, the president was saying, oh, they're not going to attack us. You know what I mean? They're not going to do that. Our president was saying they are because of our intel, but their president was like, that ain't going to happen. And even people are still going about their business and working and driving and letting their kids play. you know, all this stuff. And it's a regular city in a lot of ways. It really is. It's a relatively modern place. I mean, not compared to the United States, but you know what I mean. And the things they had going on, a free society at the level it can be in that area of the world. But, you know, I mean, there was a lot of good. And all of that disappeared in a matter of days. They're destroying the buildings, the apartment complexes, the houses, their markets, I mean, they're bombing. Can you imagine bombing the Staples Center? You know what I mean? They're bombing the places they're hiding out with their kids. Yeah. They pulled them out of that place though. I heard today. I don't know if you guys have heard any more. How many died there? But they had their. It's some kind of an arena that's been there for a long time. I thought it was a couple hundred years. But anyway, they bombed it. Well, there were like they say like 1,500 people were in there with women and children. They even had a sign on the outside that said non-combatant, women and children, you know, trying to get them not to bomb it. Well, they bombed it anyway. And it was a sports arena, the playhouse or something like that. And they thought they killed them all, but now they got down in there and found out the building took the hit, and they're pulling the people out of the bomb shelter that were underneath there. Isn't that crazy? I don't know how many died. I didn't hear the rest of the report. I heard that this morning, and I've obviously been at work all day, so I haven't heard what the final result was. Did anybody else hear? No? Okay. I was just curious. So it's important for us to keep in mind that God is saying, and we do understand according to the scripture, that there is going to be an alliance, and we understand that alliance is supposed to take place in some way, and we see how it could happen. But for the first 1900 years of Christianity, nothing resembled Gog or Magog alliance, especially with Russia and Iran, had no historical, military, or economic ties. But now they do. There is very deep ties. In actuality, Iran is one of the few countries, Iran, India, and China. I think we're the only three major countries that have not condemned Russia for attacking a peaceful nation, right? Wow. So you got Iran, China, and India, which is a little bit surprising. But anyway, and economic endeavors, so they're combined, this alliance and the biblical alliance, sharing a common driving force. Now, Islam, I believe, is going to be a driving force that is going to bring about all of these countries. You can see how that these countries, for the most part, do you think they're going to, even in the sense of Turkey, is Turkey going to line up with Russia, or the Magog, are they going to line up? Well, they're going to line up because of religious reasons. Their religion is more important than their economy eventually, right? And so now Russia is not Muslim. That's not what I'm saying. Russia is a country of opportunity. Does that make sense? It's a country of opportunity. It's an opportunity to expand their influence, their military power. I looked at it this way even. What's going on right now? Now, you know, again, remember what I'm telling you. There have been many people studying prophecy that got it all wrong. Constantly say Jesus is coming back. And remember, I quote this book called The 88 Reasons Why Jesus is going to return in 1988. Well, obviously, it didn't happen. And then the guy was dumb enough to write 89 Reasons he's going to come in 1989. But anyway. He sold a lot of books. He did sell a lot of books. In 88, he sold a ton of books. In 89, he sells many. But I'm like, there are still, if people bought it in 89, they're idiots. He just said he missed it by a year. But anyway, so I'm sure he's wealthy somewhere living off in Hawaii or something. But anyway, but the same thing happens to us. We think, oh, I mean, people really just, I mean, you know, really, you see things and we think, oh, they become a nation. Oh, one generation, this generation all pass away. 40 years, Jesus is coming back for 40 years. 40 years comes and goes, right? 70 years. It's got to be before 70 years. Now we're at 74 years. I mean, oh, okay. My point is this. We don't know. But this is interesting to me. I mean, can you see? So this alliance is supposed to transpire and this gathering and this alliance between them. And we think, how could Russia be that? But Russia's going to be looking for some partners. After this war, Russia has lost their whatever influence they had around the world. What they've done right now has caused them to lose a lot of their influence. Even in America, I mean, people think differently about them. Not only do they think different about them in relationally, but we also think different of them as far as a power. I mean, we thought they were going to just go in and stomp them and take the thing over in 3 days, like America would do. I mean, if we went in there, it would be, you know, would be like a done deal. You know what I mean? But they didn't do that. It was a mess. It was a mess. Just like us getting out of Afghanistan. It was a mess, right? And they didn't do good with that. It was horrible what our country did. It was embarrassing. Can you imagine? And not only embarrassing, we lost lives. And I got boys in the, and one girl in the military, and I don't like that mess. I don't want us to go to there either. I'm not saying that. But I'm just saying that it was messy, and people don't look at Russia the same. It's almost like Russia's going to, I mean, I would just think in my own mind, Russia's going to be looking, and Iran's going to become more important to them. And then Iran's friends are the other, you know, Islams. And those countries are going to be looking for people together. And I could see how it could happen. Now, am I saying this is it and it's going to happen? I don't know the answer to that question. But I can definitely put some dots together if I wanted to, right? So anyway, so things are happening really fast. And I want us to understand that. And I believe that there is an alliance. I believe that something is happening in this alliance. And I really think that even us and our failures in Afghanistan as Americans, that they don't trust us anymore. And even I think that they don't trust America to keep their word and finish the processes. And because there's no trust in us, I think that the whole area of all these countries I mentioned that are in a part of MOG, they are going to be looking for different alliances because they don't trust us. Yeah. And Russia said that we'll come in and help you, remember? Even though they'd had a war with them before, right? But they were saying we'll help them. And I really think we're going to start seeing some new alliances, even though we spilled a lot of blood and treasure and money, tried to let them be free, but they didn't want that. And now they don't trust us. We left on a dime and just ran off, you know? And so I think all that's going to come back. I really do. But I can see how it can all put things together. Sign number 6 to me is a pretty powerful sign. The rise of the European Union, the EU. Now, of course, now what is the difference? I kind of mentioned that a moment ago. NATO is a military defense organization. We're hearing about NATO right now. You know, NATO has expanded and grown. NATO is really a defensive organization. Is what it was all about, was putting countries together to be able to defend against the USSR, right? They didn't want them coming in and attacking. They were all too small by themselves. So what the thought was is that they would unite together so they would be stronger and be able to defend themselves, right? And what is it? An attack on one is an attack on all. So we're a part of the EU as well, because we're the, you know, we're the muscles and the equipment and all that behind that, right? So if you mess with a country that is in the EU, or NATO, I'm sorry, in NATO, you mess with a country that's in NATO, not the EU, in NATO, then you'll be messing with the United States of America as well, right? And that's the protection of that. And that's the problem they're having right now in, I forgot the name, I just said Ukraine, thank you. In Ukraine, is that they're not a part of NATO. Now they've tried to say, hey, we want to be a part of NATO. They've been working, that's why Putin probably made it and attacked them, and plus he felt we were weak at this moment. But he doesn't want them to be part of NATO because then he'd be fighting all of them, including the United States. And so he looks at that as a threat, that they would become a part of that, right? So, the EU is the economic part of the political, with the vast resources to make difference in its own members and in its neighborhood. So both organizations can complement each other. I got this, like I said today, with NATO focusing on the military operation and EU on the civilian missions part of it, okay? But the rise of the united Europe is very important. And both the NATO and EU are important to that united Europe. The Bible says a revived Roman Empire. Okay, the Bible talked about a revived Roman Empire in the end times, in Daniel chapter 2, in Daniel chapter 7, and in Revelations chapter 17. If you read those chapters, you will see the depiction of a revived Roman Empire. This will be the final world empire before Jesus returns, is what it says there. It would be the final understanding of that. And there's even more concerning that with the statue and all this kind of stuff, but we're not going to get into that. But according to Daniel, it will be a 10-nation alliance made up of weak and strong nations. Okay? So it would be a 10 nations made up of weak and strong nations. Some parts will be as strong as iron, while other parts will be as weak as clay. In Daniel chapter 2, verse 42. I'd like somebody to look up that verse for me if they would. Daniel chapter 2. I didn't put it in here on purpose because I didn't want somebody to read it for me.
Pastor, I always thought that was America.
No.
The iron and clay. Because we're divided and
yeah. There are people that believe that. And like I've told you before, that I am not, I don't really claim to be an expert in this area, nor am I dogmatic about most things. The things I'm dogmatic about is that Jesus is going to return. What I'm dogmatic about is that he's coming to get his church. And I'm dogmatic about the fact that we ought to be occupying until he comes. But you're right, Pastor Jolene, people do believe that, and there are those that would believe that. And I don't have a problem with that. And you know, that's okay. But the majority of people will talk about more about countries that were in existence pretty much then. And so that's kind of like that. But yeah, so there are reasons to believe that. Especially people are trying to find America in prophecy. Yeah. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to take one day during this to talk about how people see America in prophecy. But you know, it's somewhat of a stretch. So, but you know, there are things there though, and we'll talk about some of that stuff later. But Daniel chapter 2, verse 42, and I'm sure Benjamin has that already. Oh, Dolores, okay?
Yeah.
Huh?
Read 43?
Yeah, 42 and 43, please.
Okay. But while some parts of it will be as strong as iron, other parts will be as weak as clay. This mixture of iron and clay also shows that these kingdoms will try to strengthen themselves by forming alliances with each other through intermarriage. But they will not hold together just as iron and clay do not mix.
Okay. So I'm gonna talk about those two scriptures in a little bit more here, but do we see the empire today? No, not necessarily. We do see it somewhat, but not exactly 10, and maybe not yet, but obviously we could see how that it could be put together. Is that correct? I mean, you could definitely see how it can be put together. We can, you know, but this idea of strong and weak nations coming together is exactly what the alliance, or what the European Union was all about. It was the putting together of strong and weak countries into this alliance, and it would be about the final war, or the final world empire. I'm sorry. Its members nations would attempt to strengthen themselves through marriage. Now, I found this very interesting. Also, you remember, like I said, you know, people will try to put dots together. And I want you to know that's all they're doing is putting dots together. And so when I was reading it today, they're just, we don't know. But I could see, I mean, think of what's going on right now. Part of the Europe area, old Roman Empire, part of the European area is the country that is in war today, right? And what's happening with them? They're being displaced now. 3 million, right? A little over 3 million have left the country. And now a lot of them are in Poland, and a lot of them are other places in Europe. They're spreading all over. Is that correct? They're going everywhere. They're getting all spread out. And there's a lot of people that left their countries for reasons of war and reasons to escape, you know, I'm trying to say the word, but anyway, evil things, let's just put it that way. And they tried to escape evil things, and they went to other countries and in order to have a better life, and some have ended up in America. I love the story of Pastor Jolene's dad. His dad. So, what country was he from?
Estonia.
Estonia. So, my wife's dad's dad was from Estonia, and he was in the military of Estonia, right? In the Navy, too. Anyway, and he ended up, they went into San Francisco Bay. We're talking like a long time ago. But anyway, I forget when it was. But they went into San Francisco Bay, and they went into San Francisco for a few days, and then the ship was leaving and going back, and they were going to, you know, he's going to have to go back to Estonia or whatever. So on the way out, he jumped off the Navy ship and swam to shore.
Wow. It's amazing.
And he swam to shore. And so when we were standing there, even one day on the side of that's where the in and out there is where the Golden Gate Bridge is. We go there a lot. We used to live there, so we were there a lot. But me and Jolene went down to the end kind, and I kind of envisioned this little guy jumping on, because he's a little guy, you know, like David. And he jumped on, swimming over to the shore in America. Anyway.
Thanks to him, you got your beautiful wife today.
Exactly right. I understand. No, it's true. And so and he used to be the pastor of this church. I mean, it's crazy to think, because his dad jumped off there, and then he went on his life, and he used to pastor this church. Almost 5 years, I think. But anyway, but my point was about people sometimes will leave their home country, and they never end up going back for whatever reason. They start a new life, they start a new family, and I could see how that this spreading around Europe, and we already mentioned it, that Ukraine was the country in the country that was in Europe. That's the country that they're not only Jesus followers, and there's a lot of them that are Christians. They were the #1 mission sending country in Europe to Europe. So they were already doing that, and it's also a full gospel movement, a full gospel movement there. I'd speaking to someone 2 days ago at our convention. He had just got back from there. He had went there, and we actually took an offering to help them. But he had went there and was ministering there, and he told me that they are literally spreading those people all over the known Europe world that love Jesus and are filled with the Holy Spirit all over Europe. That's crazy. It's not a fun way to get spread around. It's very similar when we heard about the day of Pentecost and how they were spread around. It's a very similar type of understanding. And there's lots of times when we see those kind of things. You know, I'm sorry that's happening to them. I'm not saying it's a good thing by any means. But I find it interesting. But these people are going to go live there, and I can see how that then they could intermarry and marry with other people from other countries. Sometimes how many of those people's, and this is sad too, but how many of their husbands are going to die while they're fighting and in war, and they're going to get remarried. Yeah. The Bible's talking about here this European area becoming connected, but in them trying to become stronger and a bigger alliance through marriage and all those things. But the point I'm trying to say is we don't know really, but you can put dots together. There are things happening today that are very important. Yeah. So it's interesting though that the alliance, it said that this alliance, the alliance that would come before Jesus would come, would have trouble holding itself together. The alliance would have trouble. The European alliance had become very weak. In actuality, we've heard over the last 20 years constantly. So much, I mean, think about all the weakness that was there. The thing's almost fallen apart over and over. It has almost fallen apart. They couldn't decide what currency they wanted. Now, a few of them broke off the currency and used different currency than what the other ones use. It's kind of like Babel. If you don't talk the same language, then you're disunified. Well, if you don't have the same money, you know what I mean? How are you supposed to be unified? They weakened themselves. They fought about cultural issues. They fought about what money they would call their money. They fought about a lot of different things over the last period. But you guys go ahead. They have to go. They have to get going. So let's give them a hand. We love you, Pastor Billy. But as of today, the EU contains the world's 4th, 5th, and 6th largest economies, Germany and the United Kingdom, right? We're going to conclude here in a few minutes. But the EU contains the 4th, 5th, and 6th largest economy, Germany and the United Kingdom and France. But it also contains the world's 103rd, 112th, and 136th smallest economies. I don't know what it says. Why did I put that largest economics? Anyway, that's the smallest ones of the large economies. So they've got both the strong, the iron, and the weak, right, coming together in order to create a union, right? And they're not only that, the military spending in the EU contains the world's 4th, 8th, 9th, and 10th, and 18th largest militaries. And it lists them there, right? Yet it also contains the world's 80th, 87th, 91st, 93rd. Bulgaria, Lithuania, Estonia, because our great-great-grandpa left. But anyway, so that's one less. And Latvia, okay? The point is that there are these very small countries that have no power, no authority. They're in the EU along with these that are very powerful countries, creating this amazingly strong opportunity. So it's a revived Roman Empire made up of weak and strong nations. And this is exactly what the Bible says will exist just before Jesus returns. The global empire described by Daniel will be divided. It will struggle to hold itself together, which it talks about in Daniel 2:40 and 2:41. We read 42 and 43. But in 41 and 42 and 43, it talks about struggling to stay together. And I actually wrote a little bit. I kind of got ahead of myself. That's kind of why I don't ad-lib sometimes. I want to make sure I get it all here to you. But, and you think about the things that have happened, and they've become more disunified. They've kind of wanted to go their own way. And then Brexit. Remember Brexit? That just happened, right? 3 or 4 years ago, right? The Brexit vote. That was huge. People were totally surprised about the Brexit vote. And they left the Union. It says in votes to leave the Union, and Syria, oh wait a minute, no. That was what Brexit was about. People, they trying to maybe even disband the Union, and they're just struggling to survive. But yet it still remains intact. But you know what's amazing? Who has been strengthened the most by Russia attacking Ukraine? The EU. Now, those countries realize they need each other. The Russia, or we could say it like the vice president did, our vice president. See how this happened was a big country attacked a little country? Remember when she explained that on the news? Anyway, so, Russia, what? I'm sorry.
So I thought you were just going to start laughing.
I was trying hard. But anyway, so, she's embarrassing. But anyway, so, but it was an issue that they, Russia did attack, obviously, Ukraine. But the point is that all those countries feel small compared to Russia. And everybody thought of Russia as this incredible army and power and all this stuff. Well, now, the European Union are talking about sticking together, helping each other. It's made them stronger. It's made them more reliant on each other. I think we need to realize that there's something to be said about all of that. So the final is, the sign number 7, the gospel we preach throughout the world. And I'm going to let you guys read a lot of this, but we know that the Bible is available in hundreds of languages, satellite broadcast all over the world, Christian programming. Every day, missionaries carry the gospel to people who have never heard the gospel before. Cell phones and the internet and YouTube is all over the world sharing the gospel. Even recently, Elon Musk, he's created a low orbit satellite system that is a low orbit. So now we don't even have to go put all those ugly towers that they try to make look like trees.
Yeah.
You know, he's creating a network that no longer do you have to put all those up. That this web that he's created in low orbit has allowed the Ukrainians, that's how they're communicating, is he left it on for them. Now that's a powerful man that could flip the switch and turn it off, right? That's a pretty powerful man. But anyway, he told them, no, I'm not doing it. They wanted him to turn it off. He said, no, I'm not going to. I'm going to let them. I believe in free speech. They need to be able to communicate. That's why they're able to use their phones and call in and communicate. Russia had knocked that ability out for them early in the process, but they can't do nothing about the low orbit network that Elon Musk created. Isn't that crazy? I mean, that's the kind of communication, so they can still get the gospel there.
Amen.
The gospel is being preached everywhere. But you think about it, and I put it in bold here, the promise to see the gospel preached throughout the whole world was made by a Jewish carpenter with some fishermen as his followers. It almost sounds as crazy as when I tell you what God's going to do with our church and how God's going to impact this county and how God's going to, California, how God's going to use us. And we might feel like we're a few, especially tonight, but we might feel like we're few, but with God, all things are possible. Amen? So Jesus, and I've sat in Israel by the Sea of Galilee, and I've sat where they said that Jesus sat and taught in the synagogue there. I sat on the same stone. That's crazy, huh? With his 12 disciples. And he was telling them things like, I'm not going to return until the whole gospel's been preached all over the world. There's 13 of them. They don't have jets. They don't have cars. They don't have cell phones. They don't have the internet. They don't have any of that. They might have a Barker phone that they can tell the gospel about, right? I mean, they got a boat that they can cross over to the other side. If it ain't too big of a storm. I mean,
what's cool is they got right to work though.
Yeah, they did. That's very good. Preacher,
They
brother.
didn't even, they didn't hesitate. They went right out.
They went right to work, didn't they?
They went right to work.
And you know what's amazing? They went right to work and they did it 2 by 2. They did a one-on-one evangelism, going to the highways, the hedges, and compelling them to come in. They did it like I preached about last Sunday. You're exactly right. Because God gave him a vision. God had said, go to Macedonia. He gets on a boat, and you know what I mean? It's crazy. He got on a boat and he went and he shared, and jailer got saved. And we want to make it by the hundreds or by the thousands, but it's really one at a time. I mean, when you think about it, the fact that he would, do that and then they would get right to work, I mean, that's amazing to me. They didn't even really know necessarily how big the world was, but the odds of such a group preaching this message throughout the whole world was quite remote if you think about it. I mean, at the time they even knew the world was round though. No, I'm not. I'm teasing. No, they actually thought it was flat then, I think. Anyway. It is, I know, a circle. I know. I was joking. Anyway, the odds of such a group doing this is amazing.
It doesn't say globe.
It says circle. Anyway, 2,000 years later, the gospel is preached in every nation. I mean, if you think about it, that's pretty amazing. Even, I was reading and I found this stuff, and I do want to do that. It's down at the bottom of page 9. Think about it. While the message of Jesus spread throughout the Roman Empire rather quickly, it remained largely confined to Europe and Israel for the first 1,000 years. It was pretty much just Israel and Europe. And the Roman Empire. And it remains largely there in the Roman Empire is Europe, but either way, Israel for 1,000 years. The gospel wasn't preached in China, and it didn't make it to Japan. You could hear it, you couldn't hear it in North America, South America, or Australia. It simply wasn't heard worldwide for the first 1,500 years after Jesus. I mean, you think 1,500 years after, it wasn't even spreading at that point. You find a few Christians outside of Europe, Western Asia, and the Mediterranean region. And even after 1,900 years of Christianity, many regions of the world population had yet to hear the gospel of Jesus. And if you really think about it, it's true. The spreading of the gospel has happened over the last 150 some odd years. The difference of the percentage of the world that is reached now versus 150 years ago is a huge difference. And now it's flipped. Up to 1,000 years after Jesus, a tiny part of the world knew about the gospel. Now, and mostly in the last 150 years, a tiny portion of the world does not know about the gospel. To me, that is a huge sign that it's getting close to the end, especially since Jesus is the one who said that the end would come after that all of them. How did it say? I'm going to read it here. In Matthew chapter 24:33, he also said, when you see the signs, you should look up because your salvation draws near. That's not the passage I was looking for, is it? Yeah, it is good, but that's the one I was looking for. Anyway, but Jesus made it very clear that the whole world would be evangelized before he returned. And so, but we need to recognize the signs. We need to look up. We need to pay attention. And we need to know that it's going to happen, that it's near. And we need to be the watchman who sees an invading army and sounds the alarm. Not like a watchman that sees and does not sound the alarm. And I wanted to read Ezekiel 33, 1-6 in conclusion tonight. So everyone's turn to Ezekiel 33, verses 1-6. Ezekiel 33, 1-6. Can you find it there, Patty? Ezekiel, Daniel, Jose. See, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Joshua, Judges,
I'm already in one. Want me to?
Yes, I do. Ezekiel 33, 1-6. Are you okay? If it's a hard word, you just kind of mumble.
Okay.
Okay. It works for me too.
Again, the word of the Lord came to me, saying, Son of man, speak to the children of your people, and say to them, when I bring the sword upon a land, and the people of the land take a man from their territory and make him their watchman. When he sees the sword coming upon the land, if he blows the trumpet and warns the people, then whoever hears the sound of the trumpet and does not take warning, if the sword comes and takes him away, his blood shall be on his own head.
Okay, stop there. So if they choose one man to be the watchman, and the watchman blows the horn, he tells them, the swords are coming, you better get ready, and that person doesn't believe it, doesn't recognize it, then that's on them if they die. That's on the people in the land, in the city. They didn't listen to the warning. That's their own fault, right?
Yep.
Okay, read on.
He heard the sound of the trumpet, but did not take warning. His blood shall be upon himself. But he who takes warning will save his life. But if the watchman sees the sword coming and does not blow the trumpet, and the people are not warned, and the sword comes and takes any person from among them, he is taken away in his iniquity, but his blood I will require at the watchman's hand.
Ooh. So he's saying now, if they pull a person out to be the watchman, they see the sword coming, and they see the armies coming, but yet they don't blow the horn and warn them, and they come in and they destroy the people in the city, then their blood is on the hand of the watchman, the one who knew. That's a pretty serious scripture.
Are you the watchman?
You're a watchman too.
Oh.
We're all watchmen. We know what's happening here. I just told you what's happening for the last 2 weeks. Something's happening. There's a shaking happening. I'm telling you, end-time prophecy is something that people even will listen to out there. They can see it themselves. They'll talk about it. They have the wars, the rumors of wars, and the earthquakes. But there's other things too. And we need to be a part of that end-time prophecy. But yes, we need to warn people that Jesus is coming. Amen?
Amen.
Now, I know that I read a little more than I like to read normally, but I really wanted to be specific about it. And so when I was preparing this, I tried to prepare it in that way instead of outline form, so I could give it to you guys. You guys can use it to study. All right? And I want you to go back and read, because I didn't read everything. I want you to read more. And I think we might move on. I'm not sure. I've considered, and I'm going to think about it, I've considered explaining the difference between and why people believe pre-trib, mid-trib, and post-trib, and why they believe these things, and what are the scriptural foundations for each. But I haven't decided whether I'm going to take my time to do that or not. It's a little bit argumentative with no answer. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't really like things that are argumentative with no answer. But anyway, so we'll talk about it now. I'm a pre-trib. I believe in pre-trib. And I believe it has the most clarity in the scripture. Again, like I've told you, I'm okay with mid-trib. I do not believe in post-trib. I do not believe in that. Only because mostly God wouldn't pour his wrath out on us. Just like he didn't pour his wrath out on other situations in the Bible, right? Other men of God and women of God and people of God. He might let him go through tough times, but not his personal wrath. I don't think that. Anyway. All right?